Hey everyone, welcome back to the Global Missions Podcast. We are so glad to have you with us for today's episode, and as always, you can find the show notes with all the relevant links and any resources mentioned at globalmissionstoolbox.com/podcast. When we think about global missions, education isn't always the first thing that comes to mind, but in this conversation between Mags and Howard Dueck, we will explore the incredible potential of education as mission, how a vision for education can strengthen churches, schools can open doors for the gospel, and spark transformation in entire communities. We've titled today's episode, Discovering Education as Mission.
Well, hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode. Our guest today is Howard Dueck of Teach Beyond Ministries. He is located in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And so a fellow Canadian, Howard, it's nice to speak to a fellow Canadian today. Welcome.
Thank you. It's really good to be here.
Howard and his wife Eileen have served for some time with Teach Beyond. We'll hear a little bit about that ministry throughout this episode. They've had ministries in Brazil and in Germany and different projects around the world. He, of course, has some connection to BFA. Those of us in the missions community know BFA, Black Forest Academy, which is a wonderful school located in the Black Forest of Germany. He serves now on the global leadership team as well. And Howard, you said that your daughters are also involved in the ministry. It's a family affair. How do they connect to Teach Beyond?
So our daughter Bethany works on our Latin America regional team, leadership team, supporting the work across the region. And then our daughter Katie writes curriculum for our Beyond Borders program, which is our refugee outreach. So we have a trauma-informed, arts-based curriculum that she's kind of the mastermind of, and her husband also does all the design for that curriculum. So
it really is a family affair. That's wonderful.
It's an honor as parents because you don't necessarily expect that, and then when they make those decisions because of God's leading in their lives, it's very heartwarming.
It's really good. That's a great joy. And we know there are many other Canadians and others from around the world who serve with Teach Beyond. I'm just going to do a quick shout out to Steve and Pam. You know who you are, and we're thankful for your faithful service with Teach Beyond, even as it begins to wind down and you make a transition back to your homeland. Howard, we're looking forward to talking about education today and how that can be used in global missions. And maybe just a last question specifically about the organization. If Teach Beyond were amazingly fruitful and successful, I put that in quotes, in the Lord's view, what is true? What's the outcome of a fruitful Teach Beyond ministry?
Oh man, we see, and we're seeing it already in bits and pieces and amazingly, but it's really at the heart of it is the transformed life of the educator of ourselves, and just God transforming us. And I could go on a bunny trail about that, just our own journey and how God calls us into mission so often because of the special things he wants to do in our own hearts, more so than all the things he's going to do through us. And so that ripples out from that transformed, I'll call it educator, all of our staff, and then flows out into the transformation that's happening in our education context, whether it's a formal classroom setting or an informal education kind of a setting. And then so we see the transformed student rippling out into their families and into their communities and being a blessing to the church that has sent them and to the church where they're fellowshipping.
Well, here's a nice transition then to begin, deeper into our topic for today, education, and how education is a tool that our Lord uses to transform lives, beginning with the educator, but then it flows out to many others. What are some of the themes and patterns that you see in the way churches in North America, think about education and approach education in these days?
Wow, that is such a big and good question. We, as an educational organization, about maybe 10, 12 years into our Teach Beyond era, our board and our leadership, we just increasingly felt a burden for our own backyard. And so we've actually come full circle out of a concern for coming alongside the church in Canada specifically, even though this is now beginning to happen in other countries as well. But what they said to us, what they mandated us with was, be and do in Canada what we're being and doing all around the world. And so out of this was birthed the Canadian Christian education movement. And the vision of the CSEM, as we call it, is to see churches fully alive and fully engaged in education in their communities. And so it's to equip them, to mobilize them, to help them understand that, and then to see flourishing education initiatives happening in the context of local churches, but also for the good of their community and beyond.
When you speak of education, I just want to clarify for myself and perhaps for some of in our audience too. Are you talking about Christian education, like in the church, Sunday school, so to speak, Awana groups, youth groups? And or are you speaking of what's going on in public schools or other, education places?
Thank you for clarifying that. Absolutely. I mean, we have a burden for Christian education, as we typically call it, in the context of the church. But we also know that a lot of people are thinking about that, and we're so grateful. So our burden is really the actual education in the community. So whether it's the school, whether it's engaging with their families who are homeschooling, whether it's thinking even in terms of, do we engage with an actual education project for our church people and for our community? So it's the latter more so than the former.
Well, now that that's clear, there are a lot of things that many churches, local churches, are engaged with, trying to do. You could make a list of all the things we're engaged with. I was going to say busy with, but let's say engaged with. Why would you say we should prioritize education over, and as you think of it here, over and above what we're already busy with in a church?
Oh, that's also a great question. There's so many beautiful initiatives happening in churches, and we all understand church leaderships and church volunteers and church boards are carrying heavy loads. And we so respect and want to come alongside that. We see education as such a core mandate for the church. And maybe a sometimes overlooked passage is Genesis chapter 18, where the Lord visits Abraham. And this is when he's disclosing to Abraham and to Sarah the blessing of their posterity. And Abraham later on asks him, why me, kind of? And the Lord says to him, shall I hide from Abraham that which I will do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I know him, and this is the part here, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord. And Scripture is just replete with these kinds of admonitions to bring it on to the next generation. And we believe that the power of a Christian education that's shaped by a biblical worldview, that is led by people based in biblical truth and carrying forward those values, is an invaluable gift to the children of the church as they're being discipled, because discipleship is at the core of the church's mandate. And then also an incredible opportunity for ministry and blessing into the community. So we see it as a multiplying, multi-generational initiative that just reaps dividends, because as you raise up these people, they're going to be able to engage in all kinds of other sorts of church involvements and ministries. And you're kind of recruiting your volunteers in a sense, sort of as a byproduct to that. So there is that also that reproducing sort of aspect to it. Because if we do education well, we're helping these children, in the words of one of my colleagues, to relate all of life and learning to God and his word, and vice versa. And to bring truth to bear into every facet of learning. Such a tremendous opportunity to raising up our own children, and then a gift and an outreach into the community.
Well, in the second part of our conversation, I want to flip over to other contexts as well and look globally and say, how might we benefit from using education as a means. Sometimes we talk about business as mission, and many of our listeners will understand what we mean by that. When we come back after this break, we're going to talk about education as mission. So we'll continue that conversation with Howard in just a moment. Now we'd like to share with you this resource that we hope will be helpful to you and your church.
Missing family can be such a hard part of Christmas time for mission workers. It can become a major season of discouragement and homesickness, and we wanted to encourage you and your church to step into that space with your mission workers and consider sending a care package this year. If you're interested in how best to do that, then we have just the blog for you. We just released a blog with tips and tricks on how best to bless your mission worker with a care package, and it includes some practical things like how to ship it and whatnot as well. You can find it at globalmissionstoolbox.com/blogs. And now back to our conversation with Howard Dueck.
Well, we are back with Howard, and we're talking about education as mission. The main thing we've spoken about so far is about using education in Canada and serving educators in Canada. Over the break, we were just talking a bit more, and Howard said that there are resources available for Christian teachers. If you're in a public school or you know someone who's teaching in a public school or a Christian school, resources for teachers. If you're homeschooling or part of a co-op, they have resources for you. Or if you're part of a church that's either thinking about starting a school, wondering about cooperating with another church, or just all of the, I'll say even some of the legalities and guidelines of getting these things set up, this is a ministry that could help support you in that. And Howard, you said there's a website in particular that you would mention here. What is that address?
So it's the cemovement.ca. And so you can go to the resources page or other pages. One of the pages I draw attention to is the button for online prayer. If you have prayer needs or would like to actually join us, one of the biggest things we're trying to do is mobilize prayer for education as mission in Canada and beyond. So, but anyways, that website contains all that information, giving tips for how we could begin to engage. And there's a contact email in there as well. Super. Thank you. We'll make sure all of this is in the show notes. You used education as mission there, Howard, and that's where I'd like to pivot to now. Many of us know what business as mission means. We're growing in that. Education as mission is not as popular a term. I don't think I've ever heard it before this conversation in this way. Why do you think that is the case, and what do we need to do about it? Historically, education was used in missions to teach literacy so that the gospel could be preached and churches could be planted. And that was kind of like the first wave of education in mission. And that morphed and grew to a place of, well, let's support our missionary families as they go into mission, and they'll need support for their children. So it became kind of this network of schools like a Black Forest Academy, but all around the world. Every region of the world has them, many of them. And to support the family, some of them are tiny little schools, some of them have hundreds of students. And so then education was seen as a support for missions, but not so much as a way of doing mission. And what started happening in these schools is that those involved in them began to see, well, actually, we're doing mission here too. Because what happens, you're teaching from a Christian perspective, you're bringing wholeness and learning to your students and a missional perspective. And so you're doing mission on the front lines. Often, people are coming from difficult contexts, and they need a lot of member care or pastoral support for families. And so these kinds of services tend to cluster around these schools or be part of them. And inevitably, wherever there's a school, a church is going to happen, whether it's a church for the international sort of expat community, or whether it's a church into the local community. You'd be hard pressed to find a school that didn't have a church that kind of grew out of it, grew out of it. And then just the number of families that are helped in their church planting and other missions works because the school is there. And then the sort of iteration of this that we're really seeing beyond this is just people are looking for a good quality education for their families. And people in the global south or non-West parts of the world see the tremendous history in education in the Western world and a different way of doing education historically. And they want that. And it's transformational in how they do it. Because we don't know the treasure that we have in our education system here in comparison to a lot of other systems. And so it brings a whole new way of doing education. And I'm not even talking Christian at the moment, but just in that sense, educationally. But then if you have a missional thrust to it, you're going to reach into people's lives, into their families, into their communities, come alongside churches, help them do outreach. And it gets us into communities. We talk a lot about the creative access world nowadays, or the 1040 window. And, 1 in 3 people in the world have not heard the gospel. And we're so burdened with that. And we see education, whether formal, school-based or informal, teaching English as a second language, running camp programs, training outreach. These are tremendous ways to get into communities because people very quickly want what you have, and you don't have to kind of explain why you're there. Well, you're there because you're running this education program, and it can get you into places and get you rooted. And then with that, partner with and support a host of other people who are in there trying to do all kinds of other good mission work as well.
Sure. Now, I understand you've experienced some growth around this through Teach Beyond. This is something that's growing. I wonder why is that the case? Is there something in particular? I mean, the attraction you mentioned is it the education itself, the educator, someone coming from the West? How do these things help it grow?
It's hard to put a finger on all the reasons. Certainly, it's the hunger for education around the world.
Is there a perception that we bring an improved system or a different style of education, or what makes it distinctive there, Howard?
Yes, there is a perception of that, and there's also every family wants their children to get ahead, and they can't all go study in a Western institute somewhere. But if they had a Western style education, they could rise above where their current station in life. And so, even from other religious backgrounds, it's interesting. There's a considerable openness to a pretty outwardly stated Christian-based education, carefully stated in many contexts, but nonetheless quite clear in its articulation. And there's a draw and an openness to that because of the demand or the desire for the hunger, really, for that kind of education.
Oh, that's helpful. I wonder if you could just give us an example. Again, if you can mention places, that's okay. But if it's creative access, we understand, and our audience understands you might not be able to mention places. How have you seen these schools serve as a catalyst for transformation?
Yeah, I'm thinking of a school that comes to mind, definitely in a creative access location, where it's a predominantly Muslim context, but it's the immediate community has also a lot of Buddhism and animism. And so you have a complex, multi-religious kind of a composition, and coming in there with a very clearly articulated Christian worldview and we do chapels kind of a thing.
Now, if I may ask, is this a school that Teach Beyond or partners have helped start, or are these educators coming into existing schools in that context?
So this is a school that we helped start in this case, but working 95% with local educators. And not all of them Christians when they came, but the majority of them.
Interesting. Another good point.
Yeah. So there's also that layer of your own staff or your mission field in a way. It's a beautiful thing. And the In this is one example of this, raising up children to learn more reflectively, more responsively, as opposed to kind of, let's call it a more rote kind of a learning method. So to engage the mind and grow that dimension, critical thinking, creative, the artistic side of learning, the value given to the student. This is now, I'm thinking of a different school in a different context. We were doing teacher training because we have a whole department that does teacher training for under-resourced schools. And one of the comments from one of the learners in this context was, you know what, I'm going to put my whip away. I'm not going to whip my kids anymore.
Informs everything, right? Yeah. Yeah.
So they're coming from a very different background. Another one said, it never occurred to me that children are created in the image of God. So this is now going to change the whole way I look at these children. Yeah. And so you bring that and then you mobilize them, back to this other school. They go down, they do a river ministry outside of their city, and they go to the animist tribes and they teach basic literacy and numeracy. And they're bringing the gospel with that. I mean, yeah, it really has a ripple effect.
So I'm going to try and summarize it. I wonder if this fits. You can add to it or correct me. It seems to me the vision is to provide and support educators who will bring Christian character and a Christian worldview with excellence in communication into different contexts in order to proclaim the good news and engage with the community.
Oh, I wish I could record that. I mean, it is recorded. This is great.
We just did, right? Okay. Well, it's been helpful for me to kind of get my head around it, because I think that would be helpful if someone is listening and they themselves are an educator. I wonder how the Lord would encourage some of us who might be listening from North America, some of our audience in North America, saying, well, I could participate in that. Maybe you are an educator and you're hearing this and thinking, well, I could share in that. I could consult for that. Or maybe the Lord would even have you go as a goer and move to some of these places. And this is an organization that can help sending churches and even goers, missionaries, go and engage wisely. They have decades of experience doing this. And certainly you've probably hit a few potholes along the way, right, Howard?
Yeah, just a few. Yeah.
I wonder if you would just speak, we'll wind down soon, but if you would just speak to your interest in the symbiotic relationship between a church and a school.
I almost want to say symbiotic relationships, because I think this would take so many forms and expressions. For us, we, as an organization, we always think of the sending church and our heart to build bridges, we have a church relations department to really connect with that sending church and encourage and support them and thank them above all for their engagement and for sending someone and trusting them to our care to send them to their assignment and care for them. And then the relationship of our churches on assignment, as it were. And then we have something similar to what we talked about in our first half, where we're coming alongside the church or a local church and helping them think about mission in their community, but even globally, but from an education perspective. Everything from short-term trips to help at an English camp, to assigning a teacher, to assigning a maintenance worker to go work somewhere, an administrator. There's tremendous needs and opportunities.
So if I'm understanding right, your organization can help support and stimulate thinking around not only the educators themselves, but perhaps administrators in the education band, vice principals, other roles of administration and leadership, as well as other support roles as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have an opportunity board on our website, and you can visit that, and we have hundreds of opportunities around the world for people to consider, of all different kinds, for teachers and non-teachers alike.
Wonderful. Well, just as we wrap up, Howard, I want to ask whether you have particular resources that you'd like to recommend as we think about education as missions, whether it's in our sending nation or it's somewhere around the world.
Yeah, thanks. We have on our website, again, we do have a learning tab. And so we have newsletters that our experts put out with tips, whether for teaching or mission-oriented pieces. We also have a sister website called transformingteachers.org, and it's just chock full of resources for Christian educators, including the intercultural dimension. Some of our people have written books that, we could make available. We also have a podcast. It's called Transformed and Transformational, and it focuses on education as mission.
Well, Howard, these resources are welcomed in this season as many are thinking through how will we educate the emerging generations, little people, and whether they're parents or grandparents or in a church, these resources are welcomed. If someone has further questions and they'd like to follow up with you, how can they reach out to you?
I'd be happy to engage in an email conversation. You can contact me at hdueck@teachbeyond.org, and we can dialogue and I can connect you wherever needs.
Super. Well, listen, thank you so much for spending this time with us and our audience today, sharing just a little bit and expanding our thinking about the very strategic nature of education, how important it is here, can I say, right at home, whether you're listening from Canada or from the United States or some other sending nation, and how strategic it can be in an unreached area as well, opening doors for the gospel. Howard, thanks so much for being with us today on the Global Missions Podcast.
Well, thank you, Meg, so much for having me and for the tremendous ministry you're doing with this podcast. Much appreciated.
Thanks again for joining us today. If you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening, and you can also find us on Instagram and YouTube. This podcast is produced by the Global Missions Toolbox. We hope you'll check out our website, and as always, we love hearing from you and creating resources that will truly serve and meet your needs. If you've got an idea for a tool that would bless your church, or a guest that you would love to hear on the podcast, or even just a question, you're always welcome to email us at info@globalmissionstoolbox.com. It's a joy to walk alongside you in this journey. Join us again in 2 weeks, and we'll continue to explore this grand adventure of being Christ's witnesses to the ends of the earth.